This week, as we continue our focus on marriage, we are looking at the concept of care work and all the different responsibilities that families have and how that can oftentimes be divided amongst gender roles. And so you're reading from a book called The Second Shift, which is based upon Arlie Hochschild's research that took place from 1976 to 1988, and then she published the book in 1989. But she did 12 years of research, and it's called ethnographic research. And ethnographic research is when you're out in the field observing and seeing what's going on in the world. And so when Arlie Hochschild was studying families in the late 70s and into the 80s, she was doing this in a time where oftentimes it was the first time that middle class women, oftentimes white middle class women, were working outside the home for the first time. And so we had, as a society, middle class families having dual incomes and then also just, two people in a family. Couple of disclaimers on this. First of all, notice that I'm really clear about saying that this is the first time that middle class women, and I'm actually even discussing the fact that a lot of times it's based upon also race, because individuals, families who are working class, it's a matter of survival. You need both incomes. And nowadays, it could be argued that even in our middle class, you need dual incomes in order to kind of create that level of financial stability. And so, women have been working outside the home for hundreds of years. It's just in this particular instance, a great deal more women were starting to work outside the home. The other thing that I want to point out is 1976 to 1988. This is a very heteronormative model, right? So when she's looking at families and marriages, she's looking at relationships between men and women based upon the fact that we didn't have marriage equality at that time. So Arlie Hochschild and a couple of graduate assistants, I believe, would go and spend time at various families' houses, and then they would write up kind of case studies. And so they tried to spend so much time there that it was kind of just known that when the family got home from work and school on every, let's say Tuesday and Thursday, that Arlie would be there and would hang out at their house for a few hours for, years on end in some cases. And so she would just kind of blend into, the family was completely used to her, which really, really impacts the way that her research was done, because people would start to just be natural around her, right? Because they were just used to her being there all of the time, well, often enough. And so what she ended up discovering was that women were working outside the home. That's what she was studying. But when they got home, they kept working, right? They had all of the different things that they needed to do, whether it's getting dinner ready, cleaning up the house, getting things ready for the next day, getting the kids' needs taken care of, whether it's packing lunches or changing diapers or helping with homework and all of these things. And it actually the term second shift came from one of the families she was studying. One of the women said, I work this one shift at work, and then I work another shift when I get home. So I'm doing this second shift. And so when Arlie Hochschild used the term second shift, she uses it to say that there's a dual burden of paid and unpaid work experienced by working women, and that women are working one shift at work and have a second shift at home. And what she found throughout her research is it's a significant amount of time and effort. And so she found that women were working 15 hours longer than men each week, which I guess doesn't sound completely overwhelming, right? I mean, it's a good chunk of time. But when you actually add it up and you look at 15 hours a week over the period of a year, if you take 15 times 52, the number of weeks in a year, it's very, very similar to 24 times 30. So what it actually means is when women are working 15 hours longer than men each week, over a year, that ends up being equal to 1 month of 24-hour days. So think about whatever time it is right now as you are listening to this lecture, right? So what day is it and exactly what time it is? And so now think through, if you were to start working this minute and you kept working and kept working and kept working straight through round the clock for a month, and then you did that every single year, right? Yeah, that's a significant amount. So early discussed, and we discuss a lot of times in sociology, not so much in this particular course, but certainly in some other courses, that there's a workplace wage gap, that women of all different races and ethnicities do not make as much as men. And so in addition to there being a workplace wage gap, when there's this amount of work that needed to be done and that women were doing the bulk of it for many, many, many years, and we'll kind of address that again in just a few minutes, there's a leisure gap at home, right? So if you're the person who is doing all of this work, you don't have as much time to sit down and watch a favorite TV show, or to meet a friend for coffee, or to even get sleep in some cases. I have a good friend who has 3 kids, and she teaches high school Spanish. And so she has, a full-time career doing that. And so she, as her kids were growing up, now they're a little bit older, like late elementary school, so they're a little bit more self-sufficient. But as they were growing up, she would oftentimes, be doing everything that they needed, getting dinner on the table, all these different things, putting them to bed. Oftentimes she would fall asleep as she was putting them to bed. And then she would wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning routinely and start working for 2 or 3 hours in the middle of the night because it was quiet, right? So she could get a lot of things done without being interrupted, whether it was packing lunches or getting things organized, getting things cleaned up. And then she would go back and lay down for, another hour or two before she had to be up super early in the morning to get everybody ready for school and out the door, and herself to her job early, as a teacher. And so this idea of you do not have as much free time when you have all of this work done. And so thinking about just in general, how really, really overwhelming the amount of work is when you list out all the tasks. This is what I have my in-person classes do, is that they have to brainstorm all of the tasks that a family needs to do. So, and the work that's, involved in it. So it's not like, you pay, I don't know, $200 a month for groceries or something. You need to think about, like, okay, groceries means you need to figure out what you're going to make for the next week, what food you need. You need to write a list. You need to go to the store. Sometimes, maybe depending on families, you go to more than one store. You've got to come home and, organize it and put it all away. All of that work that needs to be done. You need to pay your bills. You need to drive your kids around to the places that they need to be, whether it's school, or extracurricular activities. A lot of times as a parent, you need to volunteer with those extracurricular activities. My son was a cheerleader for 4 years, and I was the cheer booster president. And so that was a lot of volunteering. That was hundreds of hours in a lot of cases. It was almost kind of like another part-time job. And so that kind of level of effort, whether it's planning all of your meals and cooking all of your meals and making sure that lunches are packed and the purple shirt is washed for Tuesday, and I don't know, the dog vomited in its bed, or like all of that kind of just emergent stuff. All of a sudden the sink is backing up. I mean, I could keep listing stuff. So you can kind of feel that overwhelming nature of everything that needs to be done. And then who's responsible for it? Right? So if you were to think through and brainstorm a list of all of these tasks, and think about, students a lot of times like try to just conceptualize this, because I ask them to write a list of all the tasks as like, oh, you need to clean the house. Well, let's think about this. Just talk through the kitchen, right? The kitchen, you need to make sure all the dishes are washed. You need to scrub down the kitchen sink. You need to wipe off the counters. You need to occasionally wipe down the cabinets. You need to clean out the fridge. You need to clean the doors of the fridge. You need to clean out the microwave. You need to wipe down, we try to be really good about wiping down the inside of our dishwasher so it doesn't get all grimy, so that's once a week. And you need to wipe off the kitchen table, and then you need to wipe off the kitchen table, and then you need to wipe off the kitchen table, and then you need to wipe off the kitchen table. Feels like sometimes all I do in life is wipe off my kitchen table. But there's so many tasks, and sometimes, like I just said, I'm wiping off my kitchen table 3 times a day, it seems, but I'm not cleaning my microwave 3 times a day. So there's so many tasks involved in even just the maintenance of one room. Granted, the kitchen would be a really, really high maintenance room, but those tasks also need to be done at different intervals. I might wipe down my kitchen table, a couple of times a day. Yeah, at least once a day. Absolutely, at least once a day, maybe twice, depending on how much of a mess we have left behind. But I'm not, like I said, cleaning my microwave once a day. That would be pretty awesomely clean microwave, but that is not the case. I'm, wiping down the counters. We're doing dishes twice a day in my house, but we're not cleaning out the fridge twice a day in my house. We're not cleaning the, hood over the stove that gets all greasy because we like to cook, some breakfast with bacon every weekend. We're not doing these tasks at the exact same intervals. And so I want you to think about, brainstorm, especially this week. Like, pay attention. Pay attention to all the caretaking tasks that you either are performing for yourself or somebody in your house is performing that you benefit from. And think through how often they need to be done, how relentless they could be, and everything else. So now that I've got you hopefully paying attention, I want you to think about, and this is what I ask my classes to do. If you had to pay someone to do these tasks for you for an entire month, how much would you end up paying them? So let's take dishes, for instance. If we do dishes in my house twice a day, and it's probably about, 30 minutes of dishwasher like loading or unloading and, washing up the other things that aren't going to go in the dishwasher and things. So 30 minutes a day, like let's say 30 days out of the month. So 30 times 30 is 900. I'm grabbing my calculator. 900 then divided by 60, because 60 minutes in an hour, right? So 30 minutes a day. So 30 times 30 equals 900 minutes divided by 60 to make hours. That's 15 hours a month that we spend doing dishes, approximately, right, on average. Well, if I had to pay somebody to do the dishes in my house, like I had to have somebody else come in, and not somebody who, is cleaning my entire house, but rather somebody who is just there for the single task of doing dishes for 15 hours a month, right? If I had to pay them, and let's say minimum wage is, it fluctuates depending on, I think, the size of your company and things, but let's say it's $12 an hour, that's $180 a month, right? And so if I conceptualized dusting and vacuuming, if I conceptualized cleaning out the refrigerator, if I conceptualized somebody doing all the grocery shopping for me, like all of these different things, and tried to think, wait, how many hours a month do I actually spend on this task? And if I had to pay somebody else to do it, how much would I end up paying them? And then think about the fact too that there's many of these domestic tasks that are kind of paid minimum wage, which is kind of the bare minimum of fairness, it seems. But many of these tasks, like when you pay your bills, you're kind of acting like your own accountant. Or when you're cooking, you're your own personal chef, right? No matter, I guess, how fancy your meals are. But how many of you listening right now have somebody who comes to your house and cooks, 2 or 3 meals a day for you? Maybe somebody does. That's pretty cool if you do. But the vast majority of us, vast majority of us, we don't have that. And the reason we don't have it is because it costs, thousands of dollars a month. People who are personal chefs, trained personal chefs, make a good deal of money. And so thinking through, like, if you had to pay somebody to come to your house to make breakfast, lunch, and dinner, how much would that end up costing? The reason I have students do this, and I know I just went on and on about it, but I wanted to kind of talk you through. The reason I have students do this is because we don't value any of this care work that is being done. As a society, a capitalistic society where we define work as being paid to do that work, like if we're at home doing stuff for ourselves, like before I recorded this lecture, I was doing the dishes, I was scrubbing down the sink, I was putting a load of laundry in the washer and getting one out of the dryer and getting some stuff folded and, doing those kind of tasks. We don't value any of those things because we don't get paid for them. I'm not going to get a paycheck later this week for those tasks. And so that's really, really problematic when it comes time to valuing this work because we don't even see it as work. A lot of times it's invisible. I watch my students when I ask them to brainstorm a list of tasks to try and hypothesize and guess, think through how often this task is done. So how many hours a month do you do this task, and how much would you pay someone? It's really, really hard for students to think of more than like 10 different things because it takes them a while to really think of this. And the reason it takes them a while to really think of it is because we don't think of this work in a way that it is work that has a value. And so Salary.com is actually a place that every year thinks of this work as having a value, and they do research. They primarily study women, and so they ask women who have families what the tasks are that they're doing for their families, and they take those tasks and go to the median income for a career that corresponds to those tasks and try to figure out how much a mom, because they're looking at moms, how much a mom's work is worth. And so I have been talking for all of this time, but I finally get to share where I'm heading towards. So I'm going to show you through the years what they have determined this work is worth. So here is in 2016, and they looked at the fact that this is a stay-at-home mom. You can see that at the top of the image. A stay-at-home mom is worth 140, I can't even say it without laughing, $143,000 a year, right? They also then looked at a mom who is working outside the home and doing kind of then all that second shift work. So the second shift then is worth $90,000 a year. I work outside the home, and I will not be getting $90,000 for all of the work that I'm performing. I'm not going to get $9,000. I'm not going to get $900. I'm not even going to get $9, right? And nobody would. That's an outlandish idea. We can't conceive of a world where we would be paid. I mean, who would even pay us for all of this work that we're doing? And so we don't really see it as work. And if you, depending on the size screen that you're listening to this on, if you pause on the screen and kind of look through that, they list traditional mom jobs, but then they also have like modern mom jobs. Like, you need to be a social media manager if you have, you know, a 12-year-old who is dabbling in social media. You kind of need to keep an eye on what it is that they're doing and making sure that they are making, you know, safe, careful decisions in their, you know, beginning internet usage. You need to be the tech person for when the computer isn't printing the paper for that needs to be turned in at school tomorrow, or all these different things. So there's other kind of modern positions that you need. And then you can also see that they included in these images the past surveys. So let's move on. This was 2016. 2017, they stopped conceptualizing both the stay-at-home mom and the working mom. And so now I believe they just have a stay-at-home mom paycheck. And you can see that it's $157,000. I'm going to, let's see, go back. I went back a little bit too much. Give me 1 second to flip through these. I'm going to go back to this so you can see 143,000, right? So that we can see how this grows. So 2016, 143,000. Now 2017, 157,000. And now 2018, they have not conceptualized 2019 yet. 2018, $162,000. And so thinking through, really, when you look at this is work, and if you were paid for this work, this is what this work would be worth. What then does that mean for all of us that do not have control and will not be getting paychecks? How do we put value on this work? How do we value this work? One of the things that I think is really interesting from Arlie Hochschild's work is that she would see women with very, very similar lives, women that were, they had the same number of children, they had the same partner, like, I mean, not the same partner, but a partner that was very similar in the fact that they either helped around the house or they didn't help around the house very much. They had, you know, just very lives that seemed very parallel and equal to each other. And some of the women that she would research and interview and observe would be really, really, like, they would report, because she would do interviews and things, they were satisfied with their life. They were happy. They were fulfilled. They had energy and everything else. But then these women, other women who were living very similar lives, they were overwhelmed and kind of a little bit negative and just kind of not seeing their life in a very positive manner. But Arlie Hochschild's looking at these two women thinking, well, and this would happen repeatedly. that, what's the difference between the perceptions of their lives when I see that they're living very similar lives, but they have very different ideas about their lives. And so what she found as she kind of looked into this more and more to try and suss out what the factor was, she found that the women that felt that they were really, really fulfilled and were reporting a higher level of satisfaction and happiness were getting something from their families that the other women were not. Something very, very simplistic when you think about it, but really, really meaningful. I'm kind of pausing to kind of give you a chance to think through, like, what could it be, right? It's actually two words, ones that a lot of times our parents try to teach us so that we're polite, right? Thank you. The women that were reporting higher levels of satisfaction and happiness, they were being thanked for the things that they did, that their families were letting them know that there was value in the things that the tasks that they were constantly accomplishing for their children, their spouses, whatever. And then the other women didn't have somebody expressing that kind of appreciation. So that's one way that we can value this work, to think through, do we have somebody doing a lot of this care work still on our behalves? Or even if we're doing it for ourselves, I mean, it's kind of cheesy to go look in a mirror and be like, thank you. I know you're not going to do that. But to think through, like really valuing this work for ourselves, and especially valuing it for somebody else that might have done this for years for us, or in some ways is still doing it. Okay, one more thing that I want to cover, the concept of egalitarian relationships, because I want to think towards, and I'm asking you in a discussion board to think towards the future of where we are going in society. And so I will be eager to hear what your thoughts are. But egalitarian relationships mean that partners share decision making, and as opposed to just saying women are supposed to do this, and again, this is a heteronormative model, and men are supposed to do this. And think about men's tasks in a heteronormative model. A lot of times they are outdoors, a lot of times they're in relation to cars or something, and they don't have the frequency, right? I said earlier, like, and I wipe down the kitchen table, and I wipe down the kitchen table, and I wipe down the kitchen table. You don't mow the lawn that often, and you don't do like a lot of tasks that kind of get delegated to men as often as the tasks that get delegated to women. So in an egalitarian relationship, you're not really thinking about tasks based upon a gender role. You're thinking about, it says talent and choice. I don't know necessarily if anybody picks like, I want to scrub toilets because that's my choice and I'm a very talented toilet scrubber. I don't think anybody technically wants to do some of the tasks around the house, but there's like a discussion and a negotiation and an openness beyond gender roles. And so discussion, as I just said, is open, and disagreement. There's, negotiation. The thought about what is fair. So what do you conceive of as fair? And have you seen in your life, whether it's your family or just kind of in general, the way that we approach care work, do you see it as fair? I would hypothesize that things are changing, right? The reason I said the things before, you're like impressed thinking, oh, she, did dishes and scrubbed the sink and put, laundry in and all the stuff before I sat down to record this lecture. Honestly, the reason why I was doing it is because my husband's at a long meeting tonight. And so, I usually am not the person that does the dishes in my house at night, and he's usually the person that does pretty much a ton of the laundry and a lot of the other caretaking tasks around here, because I'm very, very lucky that he has been socialized by his parents, right? His parents taught him and his brother that you really, really contribute a lot to the house. And so I've been very, very lucky that he is a partner in life that divides up and just naturally, based upon, because naturally is problematic, based upon his socialization, is really, really comfortable and open to doing a lot of care work around the house. Here's the thing though. I hear all the time how lucky I am. I hear from my family, my mom, my sister, my neighbors, my friends, how lucky I am because my husband is so willing to do all of these different caretaking things. I'm very, very lucky, so lucky. And I'm not standing here. I'm not saying, oh, well, he should be doing it. No. No, I know I'm lucky. I think I'm exceptionally lucky to have such a supportive partner. But if you flip the script, right, because I am in a heteronormative relationship, a male-female relationship, if you flip the script and he were at lunch tomorrow with his colleagues and they were talking about housework, Could you imagine them saying to him when they heard that I am doing, the dishes every night and do most of the laundry? Could you imagine them saying to him, "Oh my gosh, Nora does what? And then she does the ironing too. You're so lucky," right? Not exactly what you would hear nowadays. I don't know if we're heading towards that we will really, really appreciate care work. I don't know if we're heading towards a world where we divide up tasks and think about everybody doing tasks. I don't know if we're headed towards a world where we really are increasingly teaching our children early on to do these tasks. I don't know. But I will say this, I've invested a lot of time talking about this, and I appreciate the fact that you've invested the time listening. Because when you think about marriages and families, all of this care work, all of this domestic labor, all of this second shift, if you will, is such an important part of our everyday survival and such an important part of the stressors that can be presented in a family's life. And so, really hoping you get a chance to kind of pay attention to how it has happened throughout your life in your families, how it continues to happen, and then most importantly, what you want going forward as far as your plan for how you're going to tackle all the work that families need to do.